Hello and welcome. This is the last in a series of videos in which we are explaining how to use Sea Grant's integrated financial model for kelp aquaculture. In prior videos, we've gone through how users can input the data that drives this model, starting with defining what their business model is, and then defining what their startup costs will be for a nursery or potentially a kelp farm, defining what their operating expenses are, and then explaining what they're bringing into the business in terms of their beginning balance sheet and how they're going to pay for all those startup costs. Those inputs then go into a financial analysis, which returns several different outputs that are used for different purposes. These three outputs here are three standard financial projections that would be used for funders, for banks, etc., who wish to potentially invest in this business or provide a loan to this business. On the left-hand side here, an enterprise budget is used for analysis, traditional economic analysis, including break-even and sensitivity analysis for the component parts of the budget. Now in this final video, we're going to be using Excel's built-in tools for what-if analysis that will allow us to get a little bit more detail in our break-evens. Okay, so let's get right to that. So I've moved over here to the funding page to begin our discussion of Excel's what-if analysis tools. Okay, if you go into the Data tab and look for what-if analysis, there's a couple of different options. And the first one we're going to begin with is what's called Goal Seek. Goal Seek allows you to say, what do I have to change? What do I have to change one variable, in terms of one variable, in order to get me to a result I want? Okay, in this case, I've got $1,300 worth of loan payments here. And I think I can't really afford more than $1,000 a month in loan payments. Okay, so if I'm just looking at trying to reduce the amount of loans that I have so that I can get this number down here to where I can manage it, okay, we can use this process called Goal Seek to help us make that determination. Now you could physically reduce, like you could just go in here and say, okay, well, what if I only borrow $25,000 for that loan? What does that do to my payments? Well, that gets me to $955, right? So you can do that. But if you want to get to a specific number, if you want this number to specifically be $1,000, you can use Excel's Goal Seek function to get you there. Let me show you how it works. Okay, so you're in the Data tab, you go over here to What If Analysis, and you grab the Goal Seek. So I want to set this number over here. So the first line is your result that you want to get. So you click on the cell that contains the result that you want to get, and you tell it what number you need that to be. In our case, we want it to be $1,000. And we want to get to $1,000 here by changing the amount of the commercial loan that we take out. So you select the commercial loan, the cell that holds the value of your commercial loan. Okay. When you hit OK, what happens is Excel goes through the process that I just did, right? So I just picked a number. I said 25 grand, and it calculated through with that. What Excel does is it iterates until it gets to the exact number that's going to give you the result that you want. Sometimes you can actually see it happen. Let's see what happens here. Okay, so you saw it go through a little bit of thinking, right? So I can borrow $27,322 in order to get to that $1,000 loan payment. Okay, so that's one thing that you can do with Goal Seek. Now, why did I show you this example? I showed you this example because it's very simple and right on this same page. So you can use Goal Seek for much more complicated formulas. As long as you've got an input that is flowing in to give you an output, right, you can change the input to give you a desired output. Now, as I said, I'm going to show you how to do break even using goal seek. Okay, so break even is the point at which your profit is zero. Right, that means you've just covered your costs. You've got a zero profit. So let's look now for year one. Right, year one, with our given inputs, we have got a net profit of $17,849. How about we ask ourselves, given an integrated model, so how about we look at break even here in this integrated model? What has to happen? What's the minimum price of a spool of kelp seed that we could accept and still break even with these inputs? So if we go over to the business model page, we see that right now we have $200 a spool is giving us that $17,000 in profit. Now, is that a reasonable price? I don't think so. So let's go ahead and ask Excel, what's the minimum price we could accept for a spool of kelp seed to get us to a zero profit? Okay, so you go into that what if analysis again, go to goal seek, and we can do this across pages. So if I go over to the pro forma profit and loss page, and I say, here's my year's profit, right? And I can have that be zero. Right, so I'm going to break even by changing this cell here. Okay, this is a much more complicated series of compounding formulas, right? But it's the exact same thing. It's going to iterate this number until it gets our answer to zero. Okay. And look at that, it was really quick. $57.21 will get us to, and let's just verify that this is the case, zero profit. See that? It's magic. Okay, let's undo that and look at it from the other side. So if I go to the business model page, I set this thing back to $200. Right now we can do it from the other side. Okay, what's the minimum of this, the majority of our kelp being sold? What's the minimum there? So 90% of our kelp is going to get sold at 60 cents a pound. What's the lowest price we can accept for kelp in order to break even? So let's do the same thing. Okay, we're going to set our first year profit to zero by changing the price per pound of kelp. So we could accept as little as 29 cents a pound if we're getting 90% of our sales that way and 10% at 50 cents a pound. Now, the thing about GoalSeek is it's super, super cool, but it does have limitations. As you can probably tell, it only allows you to solve for one variable at a time. You move one thing, and then you're looking for a change in the output that occurs as a result of that one variable. But what we do want to do is to look at multiple changing variables in terms of what might happen if things don't work out the way that you planned. So we're going to do something kind of complicated here with an Excel tool called the Scenario Manager. Okay, so what I want you to do, first thing, save your work. This is a Kelp model, however you've named it, whatever month it is with your name. So you want to save that, right? And then you want to save a new copy. You want to basically make a copy of it, save it under a different name, okay? Because we are going to be changing the structure of this model. Okay, so you go File, save as, and I'm going to call this Kelp model with scenarios. Now the first thing that you're going to need to do is create a new page. So you put your cursor down here if you want. You can do it that way. And you can say Insert Sheet. So now we have a new sheet. It's called Sheet 1. Let's call it the Scenario Summary. And I don't want it to be red like the other input pages. I want to be able to find it. So if you can right-click here and change the color of this tab, make it easier to find. So I can make it this bright green down here. So now what you need to do is think about what might change. And so I think that the most important elements that are really kind of up in the air in terms of the inputs that I put in there are the 2 tiers of pricing for wet kelp, the price per spool that we're going to get for seed string, and our labor costs, as well as the total cost of your farm array. And so I'm going to go ahead and let these change. I'm going to give them changing values. The first thing you want to do, right, and so let's make a column header here. So we're going to say original values. So these are what we put in to start with. Now I just happen to remember that I had 60 cents originally for tier 1 and 50 cents and $200 a spool and $20 here for the nursery and $20 for farm labor. And I don't remember what the total startup cost for the array was, but I can pick it up here. It was $81,530. Okay. Okay. So these are original values that I had entered. Now here's why I made you save this model with a different name. Okay, we're going to break it. It's not going to work the way that it had. Okay, what you need to do is replace your input values in the original model with cell references that point to these cells over here in the scenario summary page. The reason for this is because in order for Excel to do its scenario analysis, everything has to be on the same sheet. And so this is how we can have the scenario analysis work properly. So the easiest way to do this would be to open up another window. Okay. Now on this side we can go and look up on our business model page. And you see here we had this 60 cents for wet kelp that we had put in ourselves. What we need to do is use an equal sign and go pick up that value from the scenario page. And likewise with the tier 2 pricing and with the price per spool, and then the labor rate for the nursery and for the farm are both found on the operating expenses page. All right, so here's our nursery labor. Again, we're going to pick that up from the scenario page. Pick up our farm labor from the scenario page. And then our total cost for the array is on the startup farm page. And what you're going to need to do, right, because this is a grayed out cell, that means that it's calculated. Okay, in order to be able to change what's in that cell, you're going to have to unprotect the sheet. And the password is 1234. And then you use a cell reference to get to the total cost for the array. So there's that. Now here we are on the scenario page. Okay. And what we're interested in, what I'm interested in, right? You could have a different metric, but what I'm interested in is the ending retained earnings. Right, so this is a calculated value. And it's calculated, it relies on all these inputs, which are now being driven from this summary page here. Right, and your ending retained earnings comes from the balance sheet. Here it is, our ending retained earnings, 98,608. Okay, so just to test, whether this is working the way that we think it's going to. Okay, let's change our tier 1 price of wet kelp to 80 cents and see whether the ending retained earnings changes, which it does a lot. So that's good. Change it back to what it was. Okay, so these are our original values. So obviously we could just go through and manually change each of these and, watch the ending result and see what happens if we change all of these. Right, but we can do it in a more organized and concise manner. Okay, so now we've got it set up so that it will work for us. So if you go into the Data tab, What If Analysis, Scenario Manager, right? We can add here with the plus sign. We can add a scenario, and we can call it our original values. And then in our changing cells, what we can do is just grab all these cells here. Okay, and so we can say Tammy's original values. All right, and then for each of these cells, what you have to do is select each of these rows individually, and right now it's just picking up the values that are already there, which is fine. You can hit OK. Right, and so there's our scenario, our original values scenario. Let's add a new one. Let's call this best case. And our best case scenario can be that our prices go up and our costs go down. Right, these are going to be the same changing cells. And so here our price for first tier of kelp can be 70 cents and the second tier of kelp can be 55 cents. And the price for seed string can remain the same, and our cost can go down to $18 an hour. And then the total cost for building our array can go down to $60,000. Okay, so that's our second scenario. Okay, and then you can have another scenario, called it worst case. Okay, and our worst case scenario can be rising costs and falling prices. Okay, and here our price for kelp can fall down to 45 cents in the best tier 1 and 35 cents for, and our price that we get for a spool can go to $50. And then our cost for labor goes up to $25 for both farming and the nursery, and our total cost for the array can be $85,000. Okay, now you can hit show the worst case, and you see how those values populate over here, and then we have an ending retained earning value of $11,958. Or you can select having all of your scenarios show up on one summary table by choosing summary. It asks you to explain exactly what the result cell is, and there it is. This puts a summary sheet in a new page. Let me make it a little bigger for you. And so you can see the current values, the original values, best case and worst case. So you can see how the ending retained earnings changes. However, right, this is not ideal because there's one other thing you really should do to have this make sense. Let me show you this. Each of these cells has a cell reference, which is shown over here in this box in the upper left-hand corner of the workbook. And so what you can do is give these cells a meaningful name. Now, the syntax of these names can't have any spaces in them, so you can be a little creative. Okay, so I gave all those cells meaningful names off camera. You don't need to sit here and watch me do data entry. Now, if I go into the scenario analysis again, okay, and I ask for a summary, have to continue to specify my result cells. Now it gives you the names of the variables in a meaningful manner, and you can see what you're looking at. So that's how you do scenario analysis. And now you see why I made you save the model before you went and did this, because now the model isn't working the way that it used to. If you tried to go ahead and use this scenario model to change your inputs, they wouldn't flow through properly. So definitely don't skip that step of creating a separate file for this scenario analysis. But it's a pretty powerful tool for working out what might happen if the worst or the best case comes to pass. Okay, so that's it. That's our video series of how to use this model for kelp aquaculture. I look forward to hearing your feedback and how it went, and I appreciate all the time and effort that you've put into learning about this.